How do you get stuff done securely in an age of zero trust? Something that we find in 89% of our customers is that they're running factories with technology that is up to and sometimes over 30 years old. A lot of the conversations we have with customers is how to expose their data points from their control systems to the enterprise in order to drive efficiencies. And standards like IEC 62443 for OT teams can be effective, especially when protecting industrial control systems for critical national infrastructure. But for manufacturers, this can be too costly due to the management overhead, as they have a very large number of disparate assets in some very large factories. And getting visibility on those assets is a major problem. Even if you have the knowledge within the business to make the right decisions about which devices can communicate with each other, the approach that is usually taken is to ring-fence those assets by installing multiple firewalls at zone and cell level. Most of the time, perimeter protection is therefore installed using firewalls, and the OT and automation teams are quite literally left to their own devices. And this doesn't solve the problem, as we know that most hacks come through enterprise services and not, as you would expect, through industrial control systems. And this is due to the high number of services that are required to be open in an enterprise in order for information workers to do what they need to do. So what we're seeing, particularly with the COVID-19 situation, is a lot of customers running 24/7 production schedules with that emphasis of keeping the lights on. And that doesn't give much headroom to implement new technologies, such as secure remote access for support, maintenance and commissioning very quickly. So what can be done to minimize risk without having to rebuild that production network from scratch? The cloud services provide an opportunity to bring IT and OT together. Cloud platform security can arguably be said to be more secure than any number of perimeter and access firewalls, but if implemented correctly. And transitioning to a hybrid cloud platform will also provide transparency and security by design. Plus, you only need to build it once. And by routing industrial data through more securely controlled cloud systems, you are reducing the attack surface and the number of data points that are being exposed across the entire enterprise. However, using some of these new technologies does not come without potentially high risk. And by not having the means to monitor what is going on at the industrial level, by not having the means to implement the right policies and controls, you can end up in the situation where for a lot of companies there are multiple routes into production systems from the enterprise and also from those supply chain vendors. Our approach is to move the remote access risk to the cloud, where it can be carefully managed, and that the factories build robust and resilient OT networks. By overlaying software-defined segmentation using industrial Ethernet switches, we can provide the means to securely implement policy across production systems. And this can be done at scale and in a cost-effective way by replacing legacy switches in brownfield sites as you go, and managing the organization's security posture through using policy nodes both locally and via the cloud for redundancy. There are many OT-specific solutions that will promise to enable you to see what's going on with your networks. Not all of them will show you what is going on below level 2, of course, and may have limited use unless you cover your plant in sensors. And even fewer of them will then actively block malicious or suspect traffic for obvious reasons. So I say to you, is it a zero trust or a zero sum game? Not necessarily. To finalise, I want to show you a couple of real cases of what can be achieved when implementing remote manufacturing processes and technologies on a solid industrial IoT base. We've helped one of the world's leading brands of fast-moving consumer goods, and they've undertaken a significant program to standardise their factory environments to improve quality and to reduce cost and risk, delivering more visibility into production machines using industrial edge switches. We help the customer with network consultation, design and deployment, ensuring the overall network architecture was fit for purpose and that they were maximising the opportunities provided by their vendors. And through such implementations, we help the company achieve a 70% improvement in service resiliency and governance compliance with regulations for healthcare and pharma. We've also carried out a rapid OT policy and security review to help a major global food and beverage brand begin their OT and IT convergence planning. And additionally, we designed the virtualization for OT implementation as part of a wider program to deliver 100 million annual cost savings, a significant amount of money, of course. They now have a strategically transformed 25 factories and multiple systems into one unified integrated supply chain for their global production system. It's a tool that we use and we like very much. We think it will help you get to where you want to go. Ethan, who will share with you the benefits of their experience and with some interesting statistics on efficiencies obtained by OT operations working remotely. Ethan, I guess over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you again, Julian. And what we've been hearing so far is the high-level view about what's been going on, some of the details about how remote access has been important for the industry and moving it ahead. What we want to talk about next, how do I want to actually go about adopting new technology? How do I build group consensus inside of my organization? And what are the steps that we're going to take in order to actually evaluate and then deploy any technology to make sure that we are really gaining the sort of advantages that we're hoping to achieve? The first thing in any conversation when it comes to remote access is defining what the end goals are. And when you first start these conversations inside of your organization, I think that you're going to find that there are multiple different perspectives on things. So there are a couple of questions that people will start asking and they'll start raising. And the first one is, we have to find technology that will solve the problem. It's a technological problem. We can just find the right technology to fix it. Well, maybe we have to find the secure technology that we need to implement. So now IT is becoming involved. How do we connect to these things securely? And so on and so forth. And do we want to enable remote access? Fundamentally, all of these questions are actually features. They're not the end goal. The primary end goal is plant efficiency. Any technology that you're putting into place need to support increasing plant efficiency. And the reason why we emphasize this so much is that oftentimes remote access is viewed as a cybersecurity problem because it has such a significant threat vector, or it can have one. And that's historically how it's been discussed. But ultimately, remote access, as we've seen, is all about improving the efficiency of your organization, right? How do we essentially keep more widgets coming off of the conveyor belt for longer so we don't have more downtime? So the key to any successful evaluation process takes a couple steps, right? So the first thing that we're talking about is going to be the security and compliance of this environment. How long does it take you to get hands-on to a problem? And then the long-term viability of any technology that you're deploying. And I'm going to walk through each one of these steps and give you our insights and our experience about what we've seen and give some examples for how this should work and what you should be talking to your vendors about and the questions you should be asking them. Let's start with security and compliance. So when we start getting into a conversation with salespeople, you're going to want to go through sort of what the basic list is. And I've put a couple of them here. The first one is, what is access control like? Your remote access product should not simply be the technical implementation of getting a signal from a computer to the factory floor. It's a holistic perspective that I think you're going to want to stitch these things all together. The first is access control. What is the regulatory framework compliance mappings that you can show us? Simply saying, yes, we adhere to something doesn't usually help you, right? Compliance is a quilt. And so we want to make sure, what are the squares that you're going to provide to us? And what are we going to have to talk to other people about getting to fill in those gaps? What's your security architecture? Are you using an older static model, or are you adopting the new, more resilient frameworks that people are using to have greater resiliency? Which is also important, because once you become a more resilient in architecture, you can also have greater fault tolerance. In other words, if it's a very static, rigid environment, if something goes wrong, if there's, for example, an outage on the internet, or if you're using Wi-Fi, something goes there, how are you going to fail onto a different environment? So what you want to make sure is that it's designed for plant efficiency. These things should be able to be accomplishable, but they should also be existing in the background. And this is something you should really drill any salesperson you speak to, really get into those details with them. This takes us to the next discussion, which is the time it takes to get to equipment. Time waste spent getting to the problem is money lost to downtime. And this can get quite expensive. So when we think about what's the cost of inaction, of not improving the efficiency here, it can get quite pricey, depending on the size of the organization. For our customers, oftentimes we find that it's a little over $100,000 a minute if they have downtime. So the things we want to go to our sales reps. The first one is the user experience. Is it a simple and attractive user experience? Are people going to enjoy using it? Is it something that's intuitive for them? What is the connection time that it takes someone to get hands-on, right? If there's a bunch of steps that someone has to go through, that time adds up. Is it accessible? This is something that oftentimes gets overlooked from a technological perspective because people haven't really prioritized it, but these systems should be universally accessible for folks with disabilities and also people that may be having older technology that they're using to access environments when they're out in the field. The third area I want to talk about is, what's the long-term viability of the technology that you're adopting? So factories are built to last decades. As Julian mentioned, right, a lot of your equipment is 30 years old. It was built with long-term viability in mind. And so one question is, what is your technology plan going to look like in 2050? That's a long way away. But any technology you want to use, you want to have it so it can scale with you, so that the dollars you put in or the pounds you put in today are ones that you're not going to have to double spend when you choose to go to a scaling vendor. So again, going back to our sales representative conversation, how often do I have to buy new hardware? If I choose to add more, if I want to cover the entire factory, do I have to buy more hardware to cover each machine that's on the factory floor? Or is it one device that can scale everything? Or could I potentially install stuff on a virtual environment? Do I have to reinstall or restart the equipment on when I'm running things, right? Does it require a direct connection to the hardware that's in my plant floor? So I have to have change process put in there? Or is it something that can run in parallel with my manufacturing processes? And will it really scale with our digital transformation plans for 2050, right? Are we going to be adopting technologies that are going to need to be ripped and replaced every couple of years? Or is it using some of the modern technologies of resiliency cloud-based environments, for example, that allow us to have updates happen in the cloud so that way we don't have to put new systems on site? In other words, can we do our maintenance and operations costs and shove those to the side and make that the vendor's problem and not make it our problem as the factory? Really, what we're trying to get is making sure that the technology that you adopt helps support your resiliency and gives you flexibility and scalability. When you're spending dollars, if you spend $1 today, you don't want to have to re-spend that dollar tomorrow or a couple of years from now. So let's take a look at what this looks like then. Oftentimes, when we think about what a good starting point is for thinking about resiliency, is we turn to regulations and frameworks. And these things we think are great because they sort of will inform what the rules are going to be going down the line. There are also new documents about cyber resilient systems that are coming out. 800 160 V2 is one of the ones in the United States. And the UK is starting to adopt these sort of frameworks as well. And what these are really talking about in the parlance is the idea of cyber resiliency. And that's kind of the next generation of where things are going. We started with security, now we're going for resiliency. And the reason why we're pushing there is that resilient systems require that secure systems be flexible. So some of the key takeaways from this section are that we want to make sure that each one of the product features are designed to improve plant efficiency. Again, the goal is to get hands on equipment as quickly as possible to remediate any problems, so that way your day-to-day operations are actually improved.